Alright, so today I'm showing you how I've set up VSTs on my system output so that I can run a headphone correction curve to all the system audio, including music that I'm listening to on Spotify or YouTube or anything like that. So that lets me listen to music through the same curves that I use when I'm writing music. So I'm making sure that what my ears are hearing is pretty consistent whenever I'm using these headphones at this computer. All right, what we're going to be trying to do today is to reroute the audio from Windows through a couple of different programs so that we can apply VSTs to the Windows system audio output. So this is my overly complicated diagram of how that's going to work. This is sort of the signal flow. So we're going to take our Windows output, we're going to redirect it to the VB cable input, which is then going to pop out the VB cable output into the Pedalboard2 input. Then we're going to apply our VSTs inside Pedalboard. Then we're going to take the Pedalboard2 output and send that to the sound card. It all seems pretty straightforward, but each step is a separate thing, and I hoped that this sort of beginning to end flow would help you think about it, because there's a few moving parts and we've just got to step through them one by one. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is install VB Cable, which you can get from this website here. The URL to that will be in the description. And what we're going to do is grab VB Cable. There's just direct download links here for Windows and Mac. I haven't tried this on a Mac. I don't know if it would work, but if you're feeling game, you can try it out. So once you've downloaded VB Cable, what you want to do is run the setup as administrator. So you can just right click and run as administrator. I've already done that, so I'm not going to do it again today. It'll install and then it will prompt you to reboot because it's going to install a virtual audio driver, which we can now use. So down here in the system tray, I've got the little speaker icon. We can click on that and it will show which output Windows thinks it's using. At the moment, it's using my Focusrite output, but we can click it and we get all the other things available, all the other devices. So I've got my monitor, I've got the motherboard, audio output, and I've got this new one, cable input. So I'm going to choose cable input, and that will send our Windows output to VB Cable's input. If you want to undo that, same thing, go to the speaker and flick it back to your actual audio device in case you do need audio while you're setting this up. Once you've switched this over to cable input, you won't have audio output from Windows anymore until we get some other stuff set up. So let's flick it over. So now we can download Pedalboard2 from Niall Moody. His website will be in the description, so you can grab it from there. What we want is the Windows download, and it downloads a zip file. In there is a Pedalboard directory with the executables. So there's no installer for Pedalboard. In my case, I just dragged that over to Documents so that I had a copy in a place where I could find it again. So in here we have Pedalboard2. To run Pedalboard, I just double-click the 64-bit version. So I'm using the 64-bit version. You'll probably want to use the 64-bit version as well, unless you know you have 32-bit plugins somewhere. Okay, now that we're running Pedalboard, let's start setting it up. The first thing that we want to do is go into options and check our audio settings. Now, I don't know how it's going to land when it gets on your system, but on mine, we need to set the input, which is the cable output from the input that we had before, and set the output to my Focusrite device. So that way, audio is going to come in through the cable output and go out my speakers. There's a few other things we want to do in here. Plugin list. I've already scanned for my plugins, but you can come in here and check that it's found your plugins. If it hasn't, you can go in here and you can scan for new or updated plugins, and you can add paths in here. If you've got a complicated setup, you'll need to add in your folders manually, but if you're using defaults, it should just find stuff. And then you can hit scan and it will go through and find any of the plugins that we're missing. And some other settings that we want to check is in Misc settings, there's an option to start in system tray and display the system tray icon. Now they're disabled by default, so I enabled both of those so that we get this nice little pedalboard icon down here. And the app just starts minimized into the system tray, which is handy because once we get this configured, we don't really need to pop open the UI all of the time. So in this view, what we can do is we can connect inputs to outputs. So we could take input 1 and put it to output 1. It's a little bit fiddly and the hit targets are really small, but let's try that again. There we go, input 1 to output 1. input 2 to output 2, and so that's the left and right channel. So when we play audio now, it should just be playing straight through like normal. What I'm going to do is rename this patch to be pass through, and then in this drop down menu we can have multiple setups available. So let's choose new patch, and for this one we're going to use a VST to rebalance the sound a little bit. So if we double click, we get all of our VSTs. I'm going to choose FabFilter Pro Q3, but you could use any EQ for this. And we can connect the inputs to the inputs on the plugin, and then connect the outputs to the outputs. If we hit edit, we can then edit the plugin parameters, and now we've got this input coming in being processed by this FabFilter Pro Q, and then the sound coming out our output. So we're able to modify system audio with a VST plugin. So if you wanted to do other processing, you could use other plugins to do that. So in my case, I've got the monitoring plugin from Air Windows. Where is it? Monitoring 64. So I can select each of these and hit delete to remove them, and send audio through monitoring as well. So we'll take the left and right, put them through monitoring, and then bring them up. There we go. And then again, I can jump in here and edit. So if I like the Cans C monitoring preset, I can just select it here, and then I've got that saved. So let's name this to EQ and Cans. Okay, so to make sure that Pedalboard is going to reload this each time that we open it, we want to do a quick save, and patch 3 sounds fine. I'm just going to save that in my documents. And we want to do a save as default so that it always reopens it. So if I quit Pedalboard now, it's gone. And if I reopen Pedalboard, it should open to that patch that we saved as default. So I'll open Pedalboard now. So you can see that it's open straight to pass through. If you want to change which patch is in which order, you can go to edit and go to organize patches, and we could move our EQ and Cans up. So that becomes the first patch, which is always loaded by default. Now, if you want Pedalboard to start when you start Windows, there's a pretty easy way to do it. You want to hit start, type in run, and what you want to run is shell:startup, and hit OK. So you can see we're in a startup folder now, and what we want to do is just create a shortcut to our Pedalboard executable in there. So we can just drag it over and hold Control and Shift, and it'll create a link in startup. Now that we've got this link in startup, every time Windows starts, Pedalboard will be started as well. And because we've changed the settings in Pedalboard to always start minimized in the system tray, it'll just start up and move to our default patch. Okay, so now the reason for doing all of that is that you can download a whole bunch of information about correction curves for different headphone types, and there is a really good chance that your headphones are somewhere on this list. There are, I think, 2,500 or so, or 3,000 or so different headphones on this list, including correction curves, which should get them all a lot closer to flat, if not just better sounding overall. If you're using popular headphones, they're almost guaranteed to be on this list. For myself, I mainly use my HD 600 Sennheisers, and what you can do is click through and get a recommendation for how to tune them with an EQ like we added just before. So in my case, I'm using the Sennheiser HD 600, so let's click through to there. We get some recommendations for how to set them up using a parametric EQ. And in my case, I have actually added in similar settings to this. Mine were based off slightly different correction curves. So here's my default that I've come up with for Pedalboard. I used their built-in level plugin to bring the level down a little bit, and then I'm loading FabFilter Pro Q3 with a curve based off the oratory curve for the HD 600 Sennheisers, and then I'm running Monitoring 64 on Can C, which I'm really enjoying for just taking a bit of the headphoniness out of listening through headphones. So everything I listen to is getting corrected in roughly the same way, which should lead to more consistent judgments in audio in general. All right, so I hope that's useful for you to set up VSTs on your system output so you can do headphone correction or room correction or whatever it is you want to do with your Windows system output. There's links to everything in the description. You should be able to get hold of all the stuff that I showed you here today. And thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.